Hello. Hello, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're just waiting for a couple more participants to join us this morning. We're giving them a little leeway because of the rain. So we hope to start in 10 minutes by 9:30. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. Hello. May we request everyone to please settle down. We're starting in 1 minute. All right. Good morning once again to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the diplomatic community, the academe, and think tanks. I am Joyce Ilas Reyes, the Deputy Executive Director for Strategic Engagements of the Strat-based ADR Institute, and I will also be your host and moderator for today. So welcome to our forum entitled Coral Reefs and Currents, Prioritizing Marine Conservation in the West Philippine Sea. So this event is organized by the Strat-based ADR Institute in partnership with the Embassy of Australia in the Philippines. This is also a hybrid event. Thank you very much for being here with us this morning, despite the continuous heavy rain since last night. And thank you also to everyone who's joining us via Zoom. I heard that we have more than 100 participants live via Zoom right now, including our friends from the media. Some of them said their regrets for not being able to come here today because I think some of them are stuck in traffic. So again, thank you very much for joining us to this very important discussion this morning. As we know, the West Philippine Sea serves as a home to rich marine ecosystems, including various fish species, coral reefs, and other marine life. Now, this underscores its critical importance not only to the country's economic and food security, but also to the livelihoods of local communities dependent on this critical waterway. It has, however, been subjected to extensive environmental degradation. Destructive practices such as illegal fishing, dredging, and artificial island building have caused significant harm to the marine environment. The presence of foreign vessels has the potential to become ecological disasters if not properly addressed. And that is why today we are gathering key stakeholders from the government, the diplomatic community, academe, and think tanks to help develop comprehensive, sustainable, and collaborative marine conservation strategies to address the pressing environmental challenges in the West Philippine Sea. There is an urgent need for stronger marine conservation efforts for a maritime nation like the Philippines. And we are very thankful that partnerships with like-minded states like Australia are here with us. Australia has been known for its management, conservation, and sustainable use of the marine environment. It has actively supported the Philippines through various initiatives, including funding coral restoration projects, research efforts, and capacity building programs. And I'm sure we'll hear more in our discussion today. So to officially open today's forum, please welcome the Second Secretary for Political of the Australian Embassy of the Philippines, Mr. Alex Sodomaco.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, magandang umaga. It is my honour to welcome you all today to today's discussion on marine conservation in the West Philippine Sea. As you know, Australia and the Philippines are both maritime nations. We both understand the importance of protecting and conserving our marine environment. As Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong said during the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit earlier this year, the maritime domain is at the heart of our shared interests and our shared prosperity. Coral reefs are one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world, providing a range of benefits to communities that rely on them. They protect coastlines, they contribute to natural disaster resilience, they support economic development, and they attract tourism. To quote President Marcos, "Each coral reef explored and each aquatic life discovered is a chance to deepen our connection with our environment and reaffirm our duty to its preservation. With it also comes the opportunity to transform the lives of many people and communities living along our coastal waters." 80% of the world's coral reefs are in the Asia-Pacific region. We enjoy the highest coral biodiversity in the world. Yet despite the immeasurable value, coral reefs are under grave threat from pollution, climate change and exploitation. So it is more important than ever that we do more to protect them. And I'm pleased to say that is exactly what Australia and the Philippines are doing. Through Australia's 328 million peso Philippine Civil Maritime Security Program, we are investing in strengthening maritime governance arrangements, institutional capacity building, and discussion and analysis of maritime issues at events like this one. Core deliverables include supporting a coral reef restoration and community education project in a marine protected area near Iba, Zambales, supporting the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to establish a national baseline on maritime litter and to improve litter monitoring and mitigation practices, and supporting the provision of technical assistance to the Philippine government to complement oil spill responses. Australia is also investing 3.6 billion pesos in regional maritime projects with marine environmental protection at their core. I'm pleased to say the Philippines is a significant beneficiary of these programs. Australia and the Philippines also recognise that risks to the health and resilience of the West Philippine Sea can emanate from beyond Philippine waters. We recognise that the use of oceans beyond national jurisdiction has grown exponentially over recent decades, presenting risks to the health and resilience of biodiversity of the high seas. This in turn impacts the health of national waters, their ecosystems, and the livelihoods of communities who depend on them. That is why Australia is proud to work closely with the Philippines to promote effective implementation of the landmark High Seas Biodiversity Treaty in the region. And that is exactly why Australian officials will play a key role in the BB&J Symposium to be held here in Manila later this week. Ladies and gentlemen, since arriving in Manila in May, I have been fortunate enough to see firsthand some of the rich marine ecosystems the Philippines has to offer. I've also been fortunate enough to learn how progress is being made to protect them through marine environment protection initiatives pursued jointly by our countries. My first official visit took me to Pangasinan, where I explored one of our coral restoration project sites in the beautiful 100 Islands National Park. There, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research is working in partnership with the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute and others to produce truly remarkable results. These collaborative efforts between Australian and Filipino scientists are testament to how evidence-based conservation initiatives can lead to successful outcomes. I'm pleased to say that some of these scientists will be joining us here today, particularly my colleagues Dr. Vanessa Rodriguez and Dr. Dexter Dela Cruz, who will present on all the fantastic work that they are doing to support best practice coral reef restoration. As strategic partners, Australia and the Philippines will continue to seek opportunities to work together to preserve the marine environment, combat climate change, and build our disaster resilience. And I look forward to continuing to see the progress made together during my time here. It is an honour to have the presence of this diverse group of experts, stakeholders from the government, academe, and the diplomatic community in the room. Let us use this roundtable discussion as a platform to strengthen our collaborations and explore innovative solutions that will help protect and preserve our marine resources and support the communities that depend on them. Maraming salamat for being here today. I am very much looking forward to a productive discussion. Mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that very inspiring message. All right. Our first presentation for today will focus on government strategies for crisis response and protection of maritime resources. Joining us today is the Officer in Charge, Chief of the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Section of the Biodiversity Management Bureau at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Ms. Leia Avila.
Should I be controlling the presentation?
So on behalf of the leaders of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Biodiversity Management Bureau, good morning to everyone. Unfortunately, Assistant Secretary Marshall Amaro Jr. and AD Armida P. Andres were not able to join us today because of an equally important matter. So in behalf of them, I will be presenting the government strategies for crisis response and protection of maritime resources for the DNR. So the Philippines is a unique archipelagic country with over 7,600 islands and one of the world's longest coastlines. Its vast territorial sea and exclusive economic zone are crucial for the biodiversity and local livelihoods. So with 78% of provinces and more than 50% of cities located along the coast, the coastal and marine management and protection is very vital. It is also located at the apex of the Coral Triangle. The Philippines is a global center for marine biodiversity and among the 17 mega-diverse countries. However, it is also one of the 36 global biodiversity hotspots, highlighting the importance of conservation efforts in our country. So at the context of the West Philippine Sea, yes, next please. The Kalayaan Island Group hosts around 600 to 1,000 square kilometers of coral reefs, which are crucial for its ecological services. Researches by the University of the Philippines under the DNR program in the past reveals that KIG reefs are essential for supplying coral reefs, corals and fish larvae to neighboring reefs and maintaining genetic diversity. These reefs are closely linked within Western Palawan, promoting genetic exchange. And therefore, protecting KIG reefs benefits not only the Western Palawan, but also the entire West Philippine Sea, other countries of the Coral Triangle, and the ASEAN. So with our oceans having the essential for life on Earth and supporting billions of people and marine species, these coastal and marine environment in the Philippines face significant threats. And these key challenges include overfishing, pollution, climate change, habitat destruction, erosion, and sedimentation, among others. So addressing these issues is essential for preserving ocean health and ensuring sustainable coastal resources for the future. So for the government strategies, to improve the state of our oceans, the effective strategies of the DNR depend on 4 components working together. So it's in policy, management and enforcement, science, and partnerships. These combined efforts ensure effective conservation and protection of our coastal and marine environments. There are several programs that the DNR have started in order to address this crisis in the Philippines in terms of protection of the coastal and marine environment. So let me provide you some of the strategies that the department have gone through according to the 4 strategies that I have presented previously. So under strategies for protection through laws and policies, the department and our field offices are guided by a comprehensive set of major laws and policies that form the backbone of our biodiversity conservation efforts. So all of these laws and policies are crucial for guiding the government strategies in response to crisis and protection of our marine resources, ensuring coordinated and effective approach to biodiversity management. So in terms of one of the policies is the NIPAS Act or E-NIPAS Act. So through these policies, protected areas are being conserved in the Philippines. To meet the post-global 2020 biodiversity framework targets, including the 30 by 30 goal, we are implementing 3 major programs, and one of these is the Coastal and Marine Resource Management. So this program focuses on prioritizing high biodiversity areas, establishing local conservation areas, and restoring degraded sites. So currently, there are 248 protected areas under NIPAS, covering 79 million hectares, and 3.14 million hectares of these are in the sea area. Okay. So through other government institutions, through the DABFAR and local government units, the Philippines continue to establish more than 1,000 locally managed MPAs under the Fisheries Code, and these local ordinances have significantly contributed as well to protecting territorial seas, enhancing overall marine conservation efforts nationwide. So I think this is one of the challenges that we're facing on this strategy. According to Attorney J. Batumbakal from the Institute of Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, there has been significant gap on marine environmental protection laws and policies due to jurisdictional barriers between fisheries and environmental management. So the DABPAR focusing primarily on fisheries and fisheries-related activities, while they are well-resourced and specialized in these areas, their mandate does not extend to other maritime activities that impact fishery resources. Meanwhile, the DNR has a broad coverage covering environmental resources management. However, it lacks specific manpower to address concerns on marine. So the Marine Office that would effectively manage or address issues on coastal and marine is kind of with the lean workforce at the moment, having me and Waki as part of that lean force. Yeah. So this fragmentation of responsibilities complicates the effective management of and protection of our marine environment, highlighting the need for more integrated and coordinated approach. Yes. Recently, policies and proposed legislative measures are introduced. So we have the RA 11995, known as the PENCAS law, that seeks to integrate the value of ecosystems into the national accounting systems, thereby improving the assessment and management of the natural capital, including the coastal and marine resources. So we actually proposed this agenda for consideration for the sharing of knowledge and experience to support the Philippines in the implementation of PENCAS law. During the preparation of the Philippines and Australian Maritime Cooperation this coming September 19. Yeah, so I hope it will be part of the capacity building that is being supported to the Philippines by the Australian. So there are two other policies or in the pipeline, such as the Blue Economy Bill that promotes sustainable economic growth by improving marine resources management and fostering innovation while also protecting marine ecosystems, and the Maritime Zones Bill, which is also mentioned as being supported by Australian aid, that aims to better define and regulate maritime zones to strengthen national sovereignty and optimize resource management. So together, these measures reflect a strong commitment in protecting and sustainably managing our coastal and marine resources for future generations. Okay, so to effectively manage and protect our marine ecosystem, another strategies that is crucial is to be engaged in thorough research and monitoring. As we said, that we cannot manage what we don't know. And in order for us to know what we have to conduct research and monitoring of our resources. So we must also observe our environment like any living system. Observing and monitoring the reactions of this ecosystem can help us identify what are the threats present and must be addressed in order for us to give a management intervention. So one of the results of the strategies of the government on research and monitoring that focus on coral health, reef structure, and resilience to threats like bleaching and pollution and its relationship to associated reef fishes. This is a care cadre's result that was supported by DNR with UP Institute, with UP campuses to monitor the coral reefs in the Philippines, and it shows that MPAs have positively impacted status of the coral reefs, including the deep reefs. So BMB is dedicated to continuously monitor hard coral reef condition within legislated marine protected areas through our field offices as part of the Bureau's commitment to the Philippine Development Plan. So it was committed for the 2023 to 2028 PDP. So the insights from research and monitoring are also crucial for improving management practices. So by applying scientific findings, we can develop and implement strategies to address issues and enhance marine resources conservation and sustainability. So observing these changes helps identify threat, take action, and create effective policies. So actually, the 4 strategies are interconnected and interrelated. So currently, the DNR is setting up marine scientific research stations across the Philippines, covering all 6 marine biogeographic regions. These stations are essential for advancing marine science and conservation by monitoring unique marine biodiversity and ecological processes. So this is being supported by academic institutions, volunteer architects to develop the marine station, and private sector partners, with focus on climate solution and finance, blue economy, and partnership and collaboration. So with these collaborative efforts, we hope to enhance marine resource management, support sustainable development, and build resilient communities. So the secretary herself is actually leading this initiative for the DNR. She's very much on hand in preparing for this. So another part of the, So in response to another part of the strategies is the development of the Philippines National Program on Coral Reef Conservation Recovery. Actually, Doc Van is one of the experts who has been assisting us together with the UP, MSI, and the other academic institutions in developing this program. So this is in response to a presidential directive from July 2022 in establishing an integrated strategy for coral reef propagation. And the DNR Execom tasked the BMB and the research arm of the department, the ERDB, in coordinating discussions with academic partners and experts. So there was conducted experts consultation, focus group discussion to finalize the elements for establishing technical working group that will be dedicated to develop the policy for the integrated strategy for coral reef propagation, and to amend the Presidential Proclamation 2146. So this roadmap and strategic action plan for the National Coral Reef are being refined and developed, and we just had conducted the last refining workshop last June 2024. So another strategies, the Bureau develops guidelines for conservation and sustainable use of our ecosystems to ensure long-term benefits. So this strategy employs various tools and programs to manage and protect these resources effectively. So one of the programs that has been running from 2016 to 2020 until 2028 is the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program, I miss the M, or Agos ng Buhay, as it aims to enhance the management of the Philippines coastal and marine ecosystem, aiming to strengthen the protected area system and improve ecological services. So it focuses on food security, resilience, disaster risk reduction for coastal communities through the 7 interconnected components that's being showed at the right part of the presentation. So given that the 95% of the marine organisms depend on habitats like coral reefs, seagrass beds, and mangrove areas, managing and protecting these areas are crucial for sustaining fish populations and support for human communities. The efforts of our actions on the environment can take years to manifest, but to give this a good chance, we need to sustain our efforts and sustain our programs by partnership and cooperation. So with enhanced survey and management capabilities and collaboration, as we tackle in this strategy, with various institutions, we've identified unique ecosystems like the Benhan Bank in the Philippine Rice. So this notable for its 100% coral reef cover and seagrass seaweeds meadows, which was designated and also designated as the first marine protected area in the Philippines EEZ. So these efforts help us understand and protect deep ecosystems which play a crucial role in supporting nearshore reefs and advancing conservation strategies. So as mentioned, parts of the Philippine rice was presidentially proclaimed under NIPAS through the Presidential Proclamation number 489 as the Philippine Rice Marine Resource Reserve. I think that's the one in the box there in the map. So in the West Philippine Sea, to better understand underexplored ecosystems, like in the West Philippine Sea, we conduct regular marine scientific research expedition in partnership with our Filipino scientists and researchers. So this expedition aimed to study ecological and oceanographic processes which will inform management practices, policy development, and the establishment and management of marine protected areas and MPA networks. So as mentioned in the earlier slides, with this research expedition and this partnership with the experts, we were able to identify that the West Philippines is as the vital community for providing corals and fish larvae across neighboring islands and countries. So under strategies on partnership and collaboration, we have established partnership on the local level wherein coastal and marine biodiversity, we know that we cannot do this alone as a government, and we need to partner in various groups and citizens in order to achieve our goal. So the BMB has support conservation through local partnership. We have convergence with the ABFAR with the hope to address the concern that was mentioned by Attorney J. Batong Bakal in terms of fragmentation of responsibilities. We have also partnership with the Philippine Coast Guard, particularly focused on the MPA demarcation, as they have the expertise in terms of physically demarcating our marine protected areas. And academic institution and experts in the previously mentioned research expeditions of the government. So this includes monitoring of coral bleaching, coordinated marine scientific research, and joint efforts in another partnership within the DNR with EMB in order to address marine litter. So it's also part. I think another capacity building that we were able to receive through the Australian aid is the CICERO monitoring of marine litter, just this recently as well. So at the international convention and regional agreements, the Bureau recognized that some environmental threats exceed the capabilities of individual countries, so at the country context. In the Philippines, we turn into multilateral environmental agreements. So these UN-driven agreements involve multiple countries and other global issues such as biodiversity loss, marine pollution, trade in endangered species, and wetland destruction. So marine multilateral environmental agreements range from general principles to specific actions, and multilateral partnership are crucial for addressing urgent threats in the regions, like the Coral Triangle, which is known for its biodiversity and ecological services. So let me end my slide with, as the Philippines faces significant challenges in protecting its marine domain, however, the government has improved its crisis response and resource protection strategies. So future efforts also concentrate on enhancing maritime domain awareness, strengthening institutional frameworks, promoting sustainable resource management, and fostering continuous regional cooperation to ensure the long-term sustainability of the country's resources. So as mentioned by Honorable Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga, our secretary, during the CBD COP15 in December 2022, we hold sacred our stewardship of one of the world's most mega-diverse countries and one of the host as the center of the global marine biodiversity. We are, however, compelled to address the intersecting crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and inclusivity to achieve resilient and sustainable management. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leia Avila, for that very comprehensive presentation. Especially interesting was her discussion on partnerships and collaboration. It's very important that she pointed out how different government agencies have been working together, how the government has been working closely with experts from the academe also, and also working with the international community to help protect and conserve our marine resources. So thank you very much again, Dr. Leia Avila. Our next speaker will talk about securing reef ecosystems through coral breeding. He is a postdoctoral coral researcher at the Faculty of Science and Engineering in Southern Cross University. Joining us all the way from Australia via Zoom, let us all welcome Dr. Dexter De La Cruz.
Hello, good morning everyone. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Hello, can you?
Dr. Dexter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me clearly?
Okay, we are having a technical problem. We can't seem to hear Dr. Dexter.
Can you hear me clearly? Hello? Hello everyone, can you hear me? Hello?
Can we try that again? Dr. Dexter?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Is that clear? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
But can Dr. Dexter hear us though?
Hello, can you hear me? I can hear you. Hello? Yes, I can hear you actually.
Okay. We can see you talking, we can see your video, but we can't seem to hear you, Dr. Dexter.
How about that one? Hello?
Hear us. Okay. Okay, we're just trying to address the technical problem, Dr. Dexter.
I can hear you loud and clear. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay. Dr. Dexter, we're very sorry. While we try to address the technical problem, we'll get back to you after our next speaker. We hope that's okay.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, nod if that's okay, sir. You can nod, okay? Okay, thank you, sir, and we're very sorry again.
No worries.
So we'll proceed to our next speaker now, who will discuss developing community-based coral reef restoration networks. She's an assistant professor and deputy director for Bolinao Marine Laboratory at the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. Let us all welcome Dr. Maria Vanessa Barria Rodriguez.
Such a shame because I already talked to Dexter that his introduction should be sufficient enough for my introduction. But anyway, it's okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Van from UPMSI, and I'm happy that Leia already introduced the value of Philippine reefs and also the West Philippine Sea as part of today's discussion. So my role is to be able to introduce to you the development of community-based coral restoration networks based on our experience in our project in Zambales. Next slide, please. Okay, before I start my talk, I'd like to introduce our project in Zambales, entitled An Integrated Approach to Marine Resource Conservation and Sustainable Fisheries Management to Strengthen Coastal Communities in Zambales, with the following objectives. First, to restore degraded reef areas in a select marine protected area, to use innovative techniques using larval seeding and coral fragments. And the third is to improve MPA management effectiveness to potentially enhance fish stocks, community education, and engagement. This project is a collaborative project with Southern Cross University, led by Professor Peter Harrison, and also by the Mead Foundation. Next slide, please. Okay, so next, please. Okay, when I was given the title of my talk, since it's not really there's no really direct relationship with what we are doing in Zambales, I thought of listing key elements in developing community-based coral restoration networks. And since this is just 15 minutes, I hope I will not bore you with my presentation. So these are the key elements. First is understanding what are coral reefs. Second, introduction to coral restoration. What is the history of coral restoration? What is the benefit of coral restoration? And then the third is, why is it strategic to have coral restoration inside the marine protected area? Fourth is capacity building. Of course, capacity building to multiple stakeholders, and in Zambales, it's the local stakeholder. And the last is my proposal for a coral restoration network in the Philippines as an output of multiple projects of coral restoration that's funded by the Australian government. Okay, so first, when we go to the field, when we go to the local government, we first introduce what are coral reefs. And I don't need to mention the value of coral reefs because I believe that everybody knows. But I guess the question is, since we are in the West Philippine Sea, do you know how many % of the coral reefs in the West Philippine Sea, in the total reefs of the Philippines? Do you have any idea? The West Philippine Sea covers 34.5% cover of the total Philippine coral reefs. And next slide, please. So now that we, for example, given what are the ecological value of coral reefs, we also give a little background on the importance or the coral reefs to local communities. So in Zambales, our stakeholders are local fishers, local government, barangay officials, and also some of the NGOs in the area. And in this case, it's the Mead Foundation. So how much is the Philippine reef? It's about $4 billion per year. This is according to the paper by Tamayo and the group in 2018. So that's how much is the Philippine reefs. And if the West Philippine Sea is 34.5%, just do the math. Okay, next slide, please. Coral reefs are degraded because of global and local threats. And it was deemed that if we just protect the area through passive approach, which is the marine protected area, it's too long before it can recover, and the degradation or the sources of degradation is too high. Therefore, coral restoration is seen as an approach to accelerate recovery of reefs. Next slide, please. So what is coral restoration? In the 1990s, the definition of coral restoration is actually to restore what was degraded. So it's like 100%. If you have a baseline of, say, 100% coral cover, restoration objective should be 100% coral cover. But in the contemporary time, because of global degradation, it's impossible to restore coral reefs, but we can only rehabilitate. And coral rehabilitation is the process of assisting its recovery from degraded, damaged, and destroyed. Next slide, please. But there are two important caveats of restoration. First, although restoration can enhance conservation efforts, restoration is always a poor second to the preservation of original habitats. Second, the use of ex situ restoration or mitigation as an equal replacement for habitat and population destruction or degradation is at best unsupported by evidence and is at worst an irresponsible degradative force in its own right. Next slide, please. Okay, so in coral restoration, there are multiple approaches and there are also different sources of propagules or corals. The first one that has been used since the early 80s was the use of coral fragments to restore. So you basically transplant corals and then it evolved to coming up with a coral nursery, just like coral gardening, before you outplant them to degraded reef. And more recently, the use of larval seeding, which actually is the talk of Dexter. So the use of sexual propagules to restore on the reef. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example, this is an asexual method of transplantation, so you can directly outplant them on the reef. Next slide, please. And this is the coral nursery or sea-based coral nurseries. So there are different types of nurseries. There are floating nurseries, rope nurseries, and also there are table nurseries. Next slide, please. So, in one of our projects, actually it's an HR Coral Restoration Governance project with Dr. Mike Fabini, we were able to publish this paper. It's actually a review of all coral restoration efforts in the Philippines in the context of governance. And one of our questions was, what is the perceived benefits of coral restoration to multiple stakeholders, from scientists to practitioners and other local stakeholders? And these are the following: rehabilitate reef habitats, improve fisheries productivity, tourism, research or experimental, community awareness, education and participation, then corporate social responsibility. Next slide, please. So now that, okay, so we have introduced what are coral reefs, what is or are the benefits of coral restoration, then we also introduced this concept. What is the benefit of coral restoration inside the marine protected area? I'm not sure if you are familiar with marine protected area, which has already also been introduced partly by Leia, but it's a part of marine ecosystem that is protected from fishing activity and other activities, destructive fishing activities. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, one of the, I think it's really strategic to do any restoration activities in the marine protected area because first, it's already protected, which means that we can maximize protection, and at the same time, if it's a marine protected area, it's already part of the plan of the local government unit, meaning it's already integrated to the coastal management plan. Okay, so that's actually one of the benefits of putting MPAs, but actually not all coral restoration efforts in the Philippines are inside marine protected area. Okay, so when we introduced the coral restoration project to the locals, we also highlight that coral rehabilitation is a process. You cannot just do restoration. I go to a reef, I saw a very degraded area, I'll cut corals and I'll transplant. There is a process from initial scoping, refining rehabilitation plan, developing detailed plan, implement rehabilitation plan, and what is really important that has not been done most of the time is the monitoring of coral restoration efforts. Okay, next slide, please. In the Philippine context, you cannot just do any restoration effort. In fact, Fisheries Code 10654 has a section stating that any restoration effort should be done, or any collection of corals will only be used for research purposes. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that it's only for research. You cannot do it without any project proposals, etc. And these are actually the requirements for any restoration effort. You get gratuitous permit from the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. You send a letter of intent, endorsement letter from agency head, prior informed consent. Prior informed consent is actually at the local government level. And then you have to have an approved project proposal, memorandum of agreement, and resume of project investigator. This is important, the resume of a project investigator, to establish that the proposal is really for research. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in Zambales, we do a series of orientation from the local government, from the governor to the to the LGU or the municipality. And actually, next slide, please. And we also do project orientation to local stakeholders, and mostly from fishers, bantay dagat, and also from the barangay officials. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the third. And the fourth is, how do we build capacity on coral restoration? So coral restoration has two aspects. First is research, and then the practice. So in this case, next slide, please. Okay, so for the science, most of the personnel that were capacitated were largely students from us, for example, from the Marine Science Institute, personnel from the Mead Foundation. We also have volunteers from different groups, and also we have Bantay Dagat. So I will not dwell so much on this because I believe it's Dexter will already discuss this. Next slide, please. Oh, that's a coral spawning. So another aspect of the project that we are proud of, this is actually led by the Mead Foundation, is really on youth awareness. So there's an elementary school close to the area that we have consistently a teacher. So the Mead Foundation hired a teacher to introduce environmental the value of the coastal and marine resources, and the sources of degradation, and also why do we need to protect them. And I think it's really good to, as a start, because actually they are really the beneficiary, the direct beneficiary of our coast, and maybe their parents. Next slide, please. So the fifth is, what are the elements of the proposed coral restoration network in the Philippines, in the West Philippine Sea in particular? Okay, maybe I'll dwell. So this is a map from our paper. It basically mapped all the coral restoration efforts in the country, which means that if it's lighter red, it's one, and if it becomes darker, it means that there's more than, I cannot remember, maybe more than 20 restoration activities. So by the look of it, it's all over the country. And in fact, our database shows that there are more than 400 entries in our database that was done since 1977 to 2023. And this was validated with publications, reports, and interviews. And the scope of restoration activities are the following: the use of artificial reefs, asexual reproduction or the fragments, sexual reproduction or the use of larvae, and the combination of multiple methods. In fact, all these activities are from 228 municipalities in the country. So now going back to the West Philippine Sea, next slide please. It's not? Okay. That's my last slide, actually. Next. So for the network of community-based coral restoration in the Philippines, we proposed, actually I proposed that the key members are the following. We really need personnel or scientists from the academe because as mentioned, you cannot just collect corals and corals can only be used for research. Collection of corals can only be used for research purposes. Therefore, it's really imperative to have scientists from state universities and HEIs. And then NGAs, or national government agencies from DAB, FAR, DENR, LG, and LGU. So why is it important to have DENR there? Because you get gratuitous permit from DAB, FAR. You cannot do anything or any research. You cannot do any research on corals without getting the permit from the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. And also other members are other stakeholders and also NGOs. And so this is actually of course, the West Philippine Sea side area. The black stars actually represents all our sites. So which means that we already have coral restoration research in all the black ones. And I propose that there be other restoration efforts from the north going down to Palawan. And for example, in Palawan, there are two state universities that are part of our project, Palawan State University and Western Palawan, WPU, Western Palawan University. So that's actually my proposal. So this network can be a platform for coral restoration learning. So which means that I suggest that it can be a learning platform where scientists and practitioners, discuss, engage, communicate, and collaborate. And I guess this is just my last slide, and thank you for listening.
Okay, hold on. Thank you very much, Dr. Maria Vanessa Barria Rodriguez. She was talking about collaboration earlier, so I took my laptop because I would also like to thank again everyone who joined us today. We have to emphasize the importance of collaboration, we have guests here today from the diplomatic community, the government, and the academe. From the diplomatic community, we have the Canadian Embassy, the French Embassy, Royal Norwegian Embassy, Indonesian Embassy, and the Embassy of Malaysia. Thank you very much for joining us today. And from the government, we also have AFP, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Fisheries. And from the academe, we have the Ateneo and the USAID. So thank you very much for joining us today. So for our next speaker, can we try Dr. Dexter De La Cruz again, if we can already hear him. Dr. Dexter?
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, Dr. Dexter, we still can't hear you here in the room.
Oh, no.
Although I did hear that those Zoom participants can already hear him.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Hi. Hello?
Hi, Dr. Dexter. Yes, we can hear you po in the phone, pero yung nasa AIM po,
Okay. So I'll just wait.
we're trying to troubleshoot it. Can we try this lang? Wait lang.
And to acknowledge as well, and to also acknowledge, we have representatives as well from the Philippine Coast Guard and the Foreign Service Institute, Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies, the West Philippine Sea Studies section. All right. Okay, let's try Dr. Dexter.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
There,
Hello?
we can hear you. Although I can also hear myself. Okay. Can you
So,
try that again?
Huwag mo akong lalagyan ng monitor.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Boss,
finally.
patanggal
Hello,
lang yung phone.
everyone.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Dex.
Yung phones.
I can hear somebody speaking from my end. Hello?
Yes, sir. You can first.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So, the topic that I was given is hold on, I'll just fix my screen, is securing reef ecosystem through coral breeding. So when we say coral breeding, it gives the premise that corals are either plants or animals that can be bred. But in fact, it's an animals that has sperm and egg cells, just like humans and other animals. And many people don't know about this because they thought that corals are just colorful rocks. So in fact, the photos that you are seeing right now, it's not grainy or blurry. So this is how the corals naturally breed in the wild. So the small dots that you see are the sperm egg bundles being released in the water column, and the fertilization occur externally. So perhaps the question now is, why do we need to secure coral reef ecosystem? And second is, if they are breeding naturally and they survived for millions of years already, now why suddenly we need to help them breed? And also, part of my presentation, I would like also to highlight and give example on the coral breeding and restoration efforts that we are doing in the Philippines that is funded by the Australian government through the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. So perhaps this is just a repetition of what have been presented, but coral reef, as we know, it's important for both ecology and economy because it's considered the rainforest of the sea, and it supports millions of different marine organisms, from corals, fish, and other marine plants. And for the economy, because of the goods and services that can be extracted from it. And it's estimated that around 350,000 US dollar per hectare per year is the value of worldwide of the reef. And in the Philippine context, as from the other presenters have discussed, Philippines has one of the highest number of coral reef system, or which about 25,000 square kilometer of coral reef, and it's directly supporting around 70 million people. So as Van mentioned earlier, the economic value of coral reef in the Philippines is around 400 billion US dollar per year, or around 140,000 US dollar per square kilometer per year. And this is from fisheries, tourism, and biodiversity. And also, as Van mentioned again, in the West Philippine Sea, it has one of the highest coral reef system, which is around 3,700 square kilometer of coral reefs. And it has a very high diversity of other marine organisms as well. And so, just like any ecosystem, coral reefs are experiencing both biological and physical disturbances. And these disturbances are very okay because they shape the corals to what they are today. And in reality, corals are pretty resilient species. They can bounce back or recover after disturbances. But because of man-made or anthropogenic disturbances, the disturbances become severe and more frequent. And because of that, the latest consensus now is 70% of the world's coral reefs is already damaged. And, and it's already affecting more than 500 million people worldwide. And the sad thing about this is that 27% of this is considered to be irreversible or cannot be brought back to their original state. And the dire future of corals, this is very scary. They said that if we continue to increase the temperature by 1 degree compared to the pre-industrial era or age. By 2050, because of climate change and coral bleaching, 70 to 90% will be dead. If that increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's like totally wiped out. The corals will be totally wiped out before 2050. So the only way and we can stop and mitigate that is actually to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And this is a very political industrial topic that may happen not sooner, but in decades or centuries. So what we can do in the background while this is happening is to really preserve what can be preserved by reducing the pressure on the existing corals and to restore what can be restored. But it is important that if we do produce or restore reefs, the corals should be future ready. So when we say future ready, these corals have the capability to combat climate change and other stresses like sedimentation, nutrients input. But the main focus now is to have a thermotolerant corals. So during natural breeding process of corals, from millions to trillions of eggs being released in the water column, very few will survive to adulthood, only around less than 0.01%, because of so many factors in each of the stage of the life cycle, including the predation, the death because of different environmental factors, and competition. So somehow breeding corals in the laboratory or in the hatchery reduces these stresses and increases fertilization success and survivorship of corals. And we tested this during the ACR project in the Philippines, where we brought back gravid or pregnant corals in the laboratory on the hatchery. And we breed them, cross-fertilize the eggs and sperm of the corals from different colonies. And we cultured them to different tanks. And in fact, we have so much that we use different inflatable pools and as an extra culture tanks. And after a few days of culture, this is how they look like. They look like small swimming maggots, less than the size of the grain of rice. And by this stage, they are ready to be released in different degraded reef system. So we did that. After 9 months, we saw the corals starting to grow on the degraded reefs. And after 3 years, they are almost size of a dinner plate, and they're almost covered the entire degraded reef. So meaning the corals were growing. And what's amazing about this is that they completed their natural life cycle after 3 years, and they become gravid. They spawned. So what we did is we collected again the sperm and eggs of these corals and did another, we brought this sperm and egg in the laboratory again, and we cultured them, and we cross-fertilized and breed them. And we did another coral restoration enhancement like on the first one. And we have a same successful result where the corals started to grow after a few years. And one of the amazing thing is that instead of becoming reproductively mature in 3 years, they become reproductively mature in just 2 years. So this is now the youngest recorded age of corals to reach sexual maturity in the world in any type of coral species. And the significant results of this experiment provided the basis of different large-scale coral restoration effort, not only in the Philippines, but also in Australia and different parts of the world. So the result of this study, the next step is to really do it in a larger scale. So if we want to do it in a larger scale, we need more coral larvae. So the only way to do this is to really collect natural spawn from the natural spawning event in the field. And we devised or constructed these floating swimming cages where we put our millions of coral larvae. And then after a few days, we will pull these swimming pools on top of the degraded reef areas, and we will release them. And one of our successful sites in the Philippines is 100 Islands. As you can see, this site is devoid of any corals, just dead corals, just few macroalgae growing, but totally no fish, no corals. And in 2020, We release around 20 million of larvae on this site. And after 3 years, so the area is around less than hectares. And after 3 years, this is how they look like. So this is the same area. As you can see, it's already full of corals with different species. Some sites are already 100% cover. And also you can see some fishes swimming around. So we brought back the corals as well as the important associated animals like the fish. So that's how our restored reef looks like in 100 Island National Park. So this is now the gold standard of coral restoration result in the world, in fact. So this is what the Australian government is trying to do as well in the Great Barrier Reef. But it's not always a happy story. So this photo was taken, or video was taken early 2023. And during summer, we had a bleaching event. So the top photo, you can see some of our corals in the bleaching event in 2023 turned white and died. But some colonies survived and didn't bleach at all. So these are corals that survived from 2023 bleaching. And we had another bleaching event this year, but on the lower photo, you can see all the survived corals from 2023 didn't bleach in 2024. So meaning these corals now are the toughest to increase in sea surface temperature. So what we did, we collected the sperm and egg of these corals and did another breeding experiment and restoration in different parts of the 100 Island National Park. And we are hoping that in the future, the corals that we are producing or we produce will be thermotolerant. So somehow we are doing selective breeding. So this is because selective breeding is the process to enhance the desired traits of plants and animals. And in this case, the traits that we want to enhance is their ability to tolerate increased sea surface temperature. So this is what we are doing in the in the field, but we can also selectively breed thermotolerant corals in the laboratory and the hatchery. So we don't need to wait for another bleaching event. So what we are doing is we are collecting fragments of corals from different colony and expose these fragments from different colony to different temperature, water temperature, and assign them as a high tolerant corals or a low tolerant corals based on the response to increase water temperature. And then we cross-fertilize the sperm and egg from these different colonies. And we then rear the larvae and then settle them into different substrate. And after a few years or few months, we transplant them in the field and see how they respond to increased sea surface temperature. So this is the result of my colleagues. So you can see the red bar here has the highest survivorship. So the red bar are the corals where both parents are heat tolerant. So the sperm and eggs are both heat tolerant. And it had higher survivorship compared to the corals whose parents are either only heat tolerant and or both parents are susceptible to heat. So meaning if we want to produce heat tolerant corals in the future, we need to really select those corals that are heat tolerant in the first place. So the other way to breed corals, thermotolerant corals, is to really isolate the Symbiodiniaceae that lives in the tissue of the corals. As we all know, the tissue of the corals, there are small algae called the Symbiodiniaceae. And this, we found out that there are 11 genera of Symbiodiniaceae living in the tissue of the corals. And what's amazing about this is that each of these genera of Symbiodiniaceae have different tolerance to heat stress. So some clades or some species are more tolerant to heat stress and some were not. So what we could do is to identify what are the different Symbiodiniaceae living in the tissue of the corals. And then we need to isolate and culture that Symbiodiniaceae that has high tolerance to heat stress. And we inoculate or put that cultured Symbiodinium or Symbiodiniaceae into the larvae of corals, and then culture it, and then let it grow, and then in the future collect the sperm and egg of those coral to produce thermotolerant offsprings. So these are the different breeding experiments that we are doing both in the lab and in the field. So the question now is, we have these tools. We have the effective tools to really breed thermotolerant corals. So the next step is, in order to secure the future of corals, we want more people to really do it. So the project of the Coral Restoration Project of ACR, we capacitate different localities in the Philippines. So we have different sites in Pangasinan, in Cebu, in Batangas, and in Palawan. So the model that we are adapting is that in each of the localities, we are collaborating with one universities, with the academe, with the local government unit, and the private sectors in each of the sites, because this is the only way that we can really promote, and we make sure that many people are doing it in order to secure the future of the corals. So we are hoping for our project to really capacitate and to train more people in different regions of the Philippines. And we want that these people that we train and capacitate will be the future trainers as well to different localities or within their area. So I think that's my last slide. So I'll leave you with the saying that if the corals are not giving up, why should we? Because we have the tools now, and we just have to work on it and apply it. Thank you very much. Oh, I can't hear it.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Mary Christery Baleva.
Tall as it goes. So, I'm really glad that I am here today. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm grateful that the Strat-based ADR Institute has embraced me as one of its non-resident fellows, and I'm glad that they indulged me when I requested that these photos be included here in our event, just because it'll help us remember what we're doing this for. It'll help us remember what we're protecting, what we're conserving, what we need to sustainably use and conserve. And I'm also glad that our scientists, representatives from the academe, spoke before me, because then we saw the science behind what we need to do, and now we may move on to policy, because policy definitely needs to be informed by science. And that is the marriage that we need to come up with in order to be effective stewards of marine biodiversity and ecosystems. And if there's one thing that I hope you would remember from our discussion, my part of the discussion, is that synergies are so important. Interconnectivity is so important. And that is on so many levels. So we heard from our scientists that our ecosystems, the species, are all interconnected, that there are so much complex processes. There are so many complex processes that are happening. We don't even see them. Sometimes we think we don't feel them, but we actually benefit from them, or sometimes we don't. In that sometimes they have negative effects on humanity, and that's why they're called contributions of nature to people. But in any case, they are there, they are happening, and they are all interconnected. And because we are talking about conservation and sustainable use, then we also have to think about how interconnected our efforts also need to be. And so it's good that we're having this multidisciplinary discussion. It's not just lawyers and policymakers in one, because really we cannot work in silos anymore. We really have to work with scientists. We have to work across sectors, vertically and horizontally. And so essentially that's the gist, no? Synergies, ebb and flow synergies on marine biodiversity conservation in the Philippines. And I wrote this paper under the auspices of the Strat-based ADR Institute. Next slide, please. I'm sure you've heard already, the Philippines is the center of marine shore fish biodiversity. And it's not just me saying this, it's not a humble brag, but it's actually findings from marine biologists and scientists. It's one of the Philippines is one of the 18 mega biodiverse countries in the world. It's the 7th mega biodiverse country in the world with 52,000 endemic species, 26,000 square kilometers coral reef area, representing 5% of the planet's coral reef area. So that's how impressive the Philippines coral area is. It has the 5th longest shoreline in the world. The Verde Island Passage is the center of marine shore fish biodiversity. And it's the natural habitat. The Philippines is the natural habitat of whale sharks and 5 of the world's 7 species of sea turtles. And it's the home of a myriad of species that are known to science and species that are yet to be discovered. And there's so much more left to be discovered. Next slide, please. And so it's unsurprising, given all this richness, this treasure trove of marine biodiversity, it's unsurprising that fish and fish products are so important here in the Philippines. No? So we're the 11th among the fish producing countries globally. We rank 11th. Fish is the main source of animal meat protein. And true to the kanin or rice is life meme, it's only rice that surpasses the prevalence of fish and fish products on the Filipino plate. No? It's the main source of animal meat protein. It surpasses beef, it surpasses poultry. And apart from that, so knowing that, no, it's easy to realize that fish and marine products are key to the Philippines' food security. So that's one thing. If we're talking about the multiple benefits of marine biodiversity. And of course, the Philippines is also the world's leading beach destination. It's the Asia's leading beach destination. It's the world's leading beach destination. I'm sure the members of our diplomatic community have ventured into our beach areas, and they really are wonderful. And to have these beautiful beaches, we have to have healthy coral reefs, because it's reefs that produce the sand that makes our beaches the beautiful destinations that they are. But despite all these, despite all these benefits, we see that ocean-based industries only contribute below 5% of the Philippines' GDP. Despite being the 11th in the world in fish-producing countries, despite the many destinations, the coastal and marine destinations that we have. By the way, the Philippines is also the world's leading diving destination. So we have all these industries apart from the other industries, maritime industries that we have, but still ocean-based industries contribute only below 5% of the Philippines' GDP. Why is that? I don't have the answers, but that's certainly a point to ponder. Given all that richness, why is the contribution only 5%? And why is it that despite the prevalence of fish and fish products in the Filipino diet, fisherfolk remain one of the poorest sectors in Philippine society? So those are things that would need to be addressed given all the richness of the Philippines' biodiversity. And so there's really growing recognition of the multiple values of nature. So you have ecosystem services, and I'm sure we know about the provisioning services, the provision of food, supporting services, the support of the cycles and the processes, the natural processes that ecosystems provide. You have cultural services. Regardless of the country we're from, there would be myths, there would be legends, there would be stories, there would be songs and stories about biodiversity, and if we're not landlocked, or even if we are, of inland or marine or coastal stories, right? The inspiration for our culture, and it's so much intertwined to the culture of the Filipino and other countries as well. So you have those ecosystem service of cultural service, and you have the regulating service, which coral reefs, for example, are natural buffers against storm surges, tsunamis and storm surges, and the ocean is certainly a veritable carbon sink. So we have all these ecosystem services, and before they were called ecosystem services, but now the concept is evolving into nature's contribution to people, because as we see, the services or the benefits that we derive are limited to one. So for example, coral reefs. We've heard from our esteemed scientists that they provide provisioning services. They are biomes where fish thrive and provide us with food and whatnot, and materials for medicine. But again, so that's the provisional service, but then there's also the regulating service that they provide, buffers against storm surges. So in essence, even the services they provide are also interlinked. So you cannot separate them from each other, and thus the evolution of ecosystem services into nature's contribution to people. And of course, these contributions, like I said, aren't necessarily always positive. Take, for example, our cute jellyfish. So their sting is one hell to reckon with if you're stung, but also they have their purpose besides that, they are part of the ecosystem and contribute to ecosystem services in a positive way. Okay? So all these come into or figure into the equation. Okay? And given these multiple values, and it's easy to have, again, an anthropocentric view of these values. Like, what benefit do people get from coral reefs and marine biodiversity or biodiversity in general? And it's often the easiest way and tempting to reduce these values into dollars and pesos, right? But now we know that there are multiple values. Biodiversity has multiple values. And so, of course, they have these values that may be reduced to dollars and pesos, like 4 million metric tons of fish are produced, equivalent to X%, 5% of the GDP or whatnot, or the GVA. But we have to remember that apart from these values, there's also the intrinsic value of nature, the inherent value of nature, that it is really meant to be here. Otherwise, we cannot be here, because humanity is certainly part of biodiversity. And so, recognizing these multiple values of nature and its contributions to people, the Philippines enacted the Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Accounting System Act, or the PENCAS Act. And it's fairly new. It was just enacted a couple of months ago. And it does provide us a framework of, again, collaboration among the various government agencies, as well as with the private sector, with the academe, and with the stakeholders. Because what it essentially does is to determine the value of biodiversity and ecosystem by recognizing them as natural capital, like any other asset. So, like any other asset, it has value. Unlike any other asset, like infrastructure, for example, that's easy enough to compute how many bags of cement was put in here and steel and whatnot, how much labor was put into the building of a structure. The determination of the value of ecosystems and their services are more complex, given, again, the complex nature of the processes, and also because they're easily taken for granted. They're just there. We have air, we have water, the animals are there, wildlife is there, so it's easy to take for granted. And how is it? How do we compute the value of natural processes anyway? So that's the challenge of the PENCAS Act, and that is why there is really a need for multidisciplinary collaboration, there is need for partnership, and there is need for funding. And so this PENCAS Act also allows us to look at nature not just as assets, but also as risks. In that, just as an example, if there is reclamation in a particular area, what would the trade-off be? How much would it cost if we have the reclamation in terms of natural processes and the ecosystem services that the area already provides, vis-a-vis the benefits that the reclamation project will give us? So the PENCAS Act, hopefully, if implemented effectively, will allow us to determine these risks, these benefits, the trade-offs that we would have to contend with. And the PENCAS Act also mandates that biodiversity and natural capital figure into the environmental impact assessment system. Okay? So again, there is this marriage of concepts that is so crucial for us to be effective in our work in conservation and sustainable use. Also gaining traction is the blue economy. So the Philippines doesn't have a law yet on the blue economy, but there are certainly bills that seek to encourage the the growth of blue economy. But there's already the ASEAN Blue Economy Framework that would guide ASEAN member states into coming up with their own national policies on the blue economy. And if you read the framework, which was born out of the leaders' declaration at a recent ASEAN summit, you would see that again, cooperation is so needed for the blue economy to actually come into fruition. Because if you see there, it identifies various industries. So it identifies aquaculture, which falls under the economic pillar of the ASEAN. And then it talks about security, maritime security, which falls under the auspices of the political security community, or the political security pillar of the ASEAN. And then, of course, you talk about the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity and ecosystems. And so the socio-political community would have to come in. And so all three pillars of the ASEAN would really have to work together for the blue economy to succeed. And so you either break that down or you multiply that. It does show how synergies are so important. And we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Australia is, the ASEAN member states are members of it, and Australia is a member of the RCEP. And you have there section 17.10, which talks about how parties would still have to adhere to their duties and responsibilities under the Convention on Biological Diversity. So it doesn't offer a lot of specificity, but it does give a general framework, a menu of legally binding obligations when trade agreements are negotiated under the RCEP agreement. Next slide, please. So we have all these agreements. We have the framework, the RCEP agreement, and the Philippines, as well as other ASEAN member states, and Canada and Australia are state parties to the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And some are also state parties to CITES and to the Convention on Migratory Species, as well as the Wetlands Convention. And they have distinct areas of protection that they offer, but again, we have synergies among them. And one of the more recent products of these synergies is the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the KMGBF, or the Biodiversity Framework, Biodiversity Plan, I'm sorry. So it was agreed upon under the rubric of the Convention on Biological Diversity. It has 4 goals, which essentially echo the 3 objectives of the CBD, or the Convention on Biological Diversity, plus mechanisms by which we can further these goals. And it has 23 targets. So you have to read all those goals, and you have to take them all together, and the targets take them all together, and not just one by one. No? And you have the target 3, for example, the so-called 30 by 30 target, which is the conservation and effective management of 30% of terrestrial inland waters and coastal and marine waters. And that's target 3, which you cannot accomplish without looking at target 8, minimizing the impacts of climate change and ocean acidification, as well as Target 10, biodiversity-friendly agriculture and aquaculture. And that's just some of the targets, but all these targets would have to be taken all together. So again, synergies. And all these concerted efforts are to address the triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. Next slide, please. This is my final slide, and it's the wild, wild West Philippine Sea. I was writing the paper at the height of the recent tensions that happened May, June, July. And so I know that StratBase celebrated the 8th anniversary of the Arbitral Award in July. There was an event. And if you read the Arbitral Award, you see that the tribunal wasn't asked to rule on the jurisdiction of any of the countries. It did not rule upon that, but it did find breaches or violations that happened in terms of the obligation under 192 of UNCLOS, which is the preservation and the conservation, the general obligation of states to preserve and protect the marine environment. Okay? And under the UNCLOS is a new treaty called it's a mouthful, the BBNJ Agreement, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. And it's often inaccurately called as the High Seas Treaty, which is inaccurate because the BBNJ Agreement actually covers the high seas and the area. So the high seas are, the high seas, and the area is the subsoil. So maybe another takeaway, please don't call it the High Seas Treaty, please call it the BBNJ Agreement, just so we're clear on what it covers. And so it's not yet into force. The Philippines is a signatory to it, a number of ASEAN member states are a signatory to it, but it's not yet in force, and it will probably take years for it to come into force. But time and tide wait for no one. We can't hold our breaths in the conservation before we start conserving and sustainably using our marine biodiversity, because we already have legally binding obligations, CBD, UNFCCC, all of these multilateral environmental agreements are already there. And there are also efforts, despite conflicting claims in the West Philippine Sea and the South China Sea, there are efforts to come up with marine protected areas. There are already marine protected areas that are being jointly managed by different states, like the Coral Triangle Initiative. There's the Silu-Sulawesi Marine Protected Area. So you have that, no? So you have the TIPA. So there are efforts already that can be, where lessons can be learned and could be replicated when the BBNJ agreement finally comes into effect. And then there's also the threshold question, of course, that what part of the South China Seas would actually be covered by the BBNJ agreement, given that it only applies to the high seas and the area. So these are the questions that would still have to be answered, and we will see how things develop, particularly when the BBNJ agreement comes into effect. But certainly, if a critical mass of states become parties to the BBNJ agreement, then there will be an additional layer of legally binding obligations that would help conserve and sustainably use marine biodiversity. So with that, again, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions and a fruitful discussion as we talk about synergies and how we can all help and we can all work together to conserve and sustainably use our coastal and marine biodiversity. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Mary Christery Baleva. That was a very comprehensive discussion. And as she mentioned, we have photos here in front taken by Mr. Danny Ocampo. They're very beautiful. So if you have time later, before you leave the venue, please feel free to approach and look at the photos and look at them in details. Okay. At this point, we will now proceed to our open forum. Okay. So maybe we could call back here in front our panelists. Dr. Mary Christery Baleva, Dr. Maria Vanessa Barria Rodriguez. And I think Dr. Dexter is still with us. He'll be joining us via Zoom. Okay. So I'll be asking my initial questions to our panelists first, but later on we'll be opening the floor for questions from our audience members or participants here in the venue as well. And to those who are watching us live via Zoom, please feel free to leave your questions as well on the Q&A box on your screen so that we can also ask them to our panelists later. All right. So I can sit here. Okay. All right. Okay. Girl power pala with with Dr. Dexter online. Okay, we're still waiting for him. Okay. But okay, we'll
Yep.
proceed. So we'll just see Dr. Dexter when he's back later. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the very insightful presentations made earlier. As most of you said earlier, the West Philippine Sea is known to be a traditional fishing ground. Oh, there's Dr. Dexter. So the West Philippine Sea is known to be a traditional fishing ground for Filipinos. And as mentioned earlier, also it accounts to about a third, or as Dr. Van said earlier, 34.5% of the country's total fisheries or coral reef cover. In the past years, the problem is, as I've also mentioned in the opening statement earlier, China's aggressive actions and expansionist agenda has led to the destruction of a massive area in the marine environment in the West Philippine Sea. As Ms. Leia mentioned earlier, we cannot manage what we don't know. All right, so to start our discussion, I would like to ask, do we have an update on the extent of the damages made by China in the West Philippine Sea, so that we're just aware of what's happening in that area?
I think we haven't actually assessed the full extent of the damage in the West Philippine Sea, but with the conditions being reported in the every 2 years of the expedition being conducted here, I think it was reported to have a significant decrease actually of the coral cover in the area. But up to the actual figure, I cannot. I don't know. I don't know yet, as the last expedition is being analyzed and processed by the partner institutions.
If I may call a friend, Colonel Francel, maybe you can help us just provide a background on the destruction in the West Philippine Sea caused by foreign vessels, perhaps. We have Colonel Francel of the AFP.
All right, good morning to everyone. I am off panel, but I just read some reports that it was 23 acres of destroyed corals, but it's not the most recent, no. But we have been monitoring the activities that are being done and the reclamation that are militarized zones in the area. So with that, and also seeing your presentations, I really had a very good glimpse as well on how things are going. For background, no, I became the spokesperson in January. I am a signal officer and I am into cybersecurity. So everything is also a whirlwind of a lot of information for me as well in this case. But I'm inherently a development practitioner, being a soldier, and I have been looking at sustainable development practices over the years and how we would really be implementing it in the Philippines. This is when one really step in the right direction for the Philippines. And with the Escoda Shoal, the background with that is that because there are a lot of different scenarios in the West Philippine Sea with these rocks, islands, and features being distinct from one another. And Escoda Shoal is it's a shoal, so it's underwater. And so what we've seen recently was that there is somehow a sort of a dumping of corals, dead corals, in order to make it come out of the water, in order for it to be able to be declared as a feature that can be built, that can be reclaimed, so to speak. So that's why this destruction of corals was their way of dumping this in order to make Escoda Shoal such a feature. And so this is what we are trying to prevent, and that's why we have sent our biggest Coast Guard vessel in the area to prevent the further reclamation of Escoda Shoal. And this is what's heightening the tensions right now. So as we can see, there's a gradual shift from Ayungin Shoal to Escoda Shoal. So this is a grave show of force as well, with 40 vessels from China handling one vessel coming in for a humanitarian mission. So this is all not just an AFP concern, but also, of course, not the whole international community, so to speak. And that's why I believe with all of these people in the room being like-minded nations, we are all one in the same goal of having a free and open Indo-Pacific. So I guess more of the details on all this will be discussed more, but that's more of the background there in terms of national security issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel Francel. Hearing what he said from the perspective of marine science, what does that massive destruction mean? 23 acres of destructed coral reefs. What are the consequences of these to the marine life in terms of fish catch, habitat health, and perhaps even climate regulation? Would you like to? All right. Would you like to start, Dr. Van? Dr. Van, and maybe Dr. Dexter after. All right.
Okay, any destruction, regardless of site, has really an implication on biodiversity. And since the main interest of many Filipino fishers are really on the fishery, there's a significant decline. But as to the number, we don't know yet. We currently have a project that is related to PENCAS, actually. We are trying to value resources in the West Philippine Sea area. And it's still ongoing, but definitely we'll have numbers. We are working with environmental economists and also lawyers to do that. So to answer, yes, there is a direct effect or negative effect on biodiversity. As to the number, we don't know yet, but we will be able to answer that in due time. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Dexter, would you like to comment on that?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Also, 23 hectare is it's a huge area. So we know the value of each hectare as what we presented earlier. So that's direct impact on the different fish catch and other goods and services that can be extracted from that particular area. But just put in mind that the West Philippine Sea, it is a breeding ground for many fishes and different marine organisms. So it means that it supplies larvae not only on the western part of the Philippines, but also in some of the internal seas. So destruction of habitat in this area will not only affect the West Philippine Sea, but a huge portion of the Philippines as well. And this will not only in the fisheries, but also in marine biodiversity. So because as we said, it's all interconnected, and West Philippine Sea is a huge area. It's a huge breeding ground area for fish and marine biodiversity. So anything that's happening in the West Philippine Sea can trickle down in any parts of the Philippines as well.
Thank you. I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious though, how long will it take, kaya, ma'am, to restore damaged corals amounting to about 23 acres? And Dr. Dexter mentioned earlier about corals being destroyed and this being irreversible. The damage that we have in West Philippine Sea, can it still be addressed? Can we still restore these corals, or are these damages irreversible already?
Maybe Dexter,
Dr. Dexter?
So we really need to have a proper survey on the area. So because, for example, it doesn't mean that it's degraded. We need immediately a restoration effort, because the main purpose of restoration is just to jumpstart or help to restore a degraded ecosystem. But if there are enough corals surrounding that area, and if we just leave it like that, or reduce the pressure on those degraded area, it might bounce back on their own. So we don't need any restoration efforts. But if the ecosystem or the substrate phase shifted, or if the environment become unsuitable for the corals to grow back, then it means it's irreversible, or we cannot really do something about it. And then probably we can do some restoration effort on that area. So yes, it's degraded, but we need to really think and see, have a proper survey if restoration intervention is needed or not, if the system can bounce back naturally as the same as the other part of the Philippines. So yeah.
Thank you. You go ahead, ma'am.
And just to drive home the point of interconnectivity, we're not just talking about marine biodiversity, because if the marine ecosystem is affected, then it could also affect migratory birds. These are flyway paths of migratory birds and other migratory species. And so, again, not just marine biodiversity, but also birds, and of course, people would be affected if there is massive destruction of marine ecosystems.
Dr. Van, would you like to add something? Okay. Ma'am, in terms of policies, what strategies do you think can be implemented to prevent or to protect our marine environment, considering we are aware we are aware of the presence of foreign vessels in the West Philippine Sea, so we can just assume that further destruction is inevitable. So how, in terms of policies, what can we do to prevent, at least to protect our marine resources?
Thank you. So first, we have to protect our own, our jurisdiction with our own laws. So Filipinos would also have to follow Philippine laws. So again, start from within. And then we have Philippine laws, we have a number of laws. One of the challenges of teaching environmental law, Philippine environmental law, is that already from the get-go, you have 7 laws that you have to teach. And so you have that. We have laws plus the PENCAS Act. It's a new law. There are bills that are being presented, that are being deliberated. So we have that. And then we have multilateral environmental agreements that, of course, have their counterparts as national laws. And then you have that in the international arena. And what I can say about the Philippines is that it has been very active also at the international fora in negotiating during the CBD at the UNFCCC, looking at partnerships and funding to be able to really mobilize resources, both technical, scientific, and monetary resources, to be able to come up with effective solutions. In terms of policy, because the Philippines is a state party to all these multilateral environmental agreements, and the CBD and the UNFCCC almost have universal membership from the state parties. Even UNCLOS, it's not a multilateral environmental agreement, but it does have, as part of its ethos, the protection and the conservation of marine biodiversity and marine ecosystems in the marine environment, then these are actually avenues by which we could have different pathways. No? So there's certainly a way of cooperating on a scientific level. And there's also a way by which diplomatic channels could be used. And then we saw from the arbitral award that that's also an avenue that could be explored to protect national interests. No? So I guess the policy is not working in silos, but looking at the various options that we have in order to protect national interests, and most of all, to conserve and sustainably use our marine biodiversity that not only affects the Philippines, but the entire region and the entire world.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Lea, would you like to
I
add
think
to that?
Dr. Valieva have already comprehensively explained, but what I can add to the discussion is that the importance of community participation and stakeholders consultation in every policy that we are lobbying. So I think all the existing policies in the pipeline and the already approved ones needs to be implemented, and with it will only be possible if our concerned stakeholders also understand what it is for and how they can contribute to that.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah, one more example on joint or collaborative research is JOMSRE. JOMSRE is a joint oceanographic research JOMSRE, joint oceanographic marine scientific research expedition with Vietnam. For example, there was one before, and now I think there's an ongoing discussion on that. So maybe joint marine scientific research in the area with all the interested parties, I think is really good to understand the value of not just the West Philippine Sea or area, and also the value of collaboration towards conservation. So I think that's really important. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do we have questions from our audience? Yes.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Samantha Beltran from the South China Morning Post. My question to anyone who can answer is that, so China has accused the Philippines of the BRP Sierra Madre grounded, of it inflicting damage on the coral reefs, which the Philippines has already denied. I'd like to ask if anybody could answer, is there legitimacy to the claim based on scientific knowledge? And has there already been an update to the third-party assessment that was done based on this claim? Thank you.
I think it would be better, ma'am, to look at the bigger picture in this. Let's look at the reclaimed islands vis-a-vis the location of LS-57. I think the bare minimum can be compared to whatever it is that can be found out as the result of the grounding of LS-57 as compared to the numerous damages that was incurred by the militarization of a lot of features in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you, ma'am.
Joaquin Sylvester from the Biodiversity Management Bureau. Also, just to answer the question, so in the 2016 arbitral award, one of the experts' reports by, I think, Dr. Furs, also already mentions that the reclamation and artificial island building, as was found during the actual ruling, involves the complete burial of coral reefs in the Kalayaan Island group. So generally, when there's a complete burial of the reefs, it's completely destroyed and more or less lost to us forever. So just to add to that, that's the big picture of what happened in the Kalayaan Island group, as found in the arbitral award, which I think the Philippine government will be upholding in. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I actually still have a bunch of questions for our panelists, but I was just informed that We don't have time left anymore. So last question from our audience. We can accept one more according to our president, Professor Manhit. Okay, final question. Yes, please.
I was just curious, you, in one of your presentations, discussed deep reefs and their kind of understanding of where those are in the Philippines. What does the Philippines consider deep when you're making the distinction between a deep reef and other reef systems?
So deep reefs are at the Mesopotamic zone, wherein we are looking into the study from the CARE cadres, the previous program of the DNR that was supported, shows the potential of the deep reefs areas to contribute to the resiliency of the coral reef ecosystem in the Philippines. So although it has not been studied well at the moment, but on a certain areas, we're trying to, I think it would be one of the pilot sites there is in the Masinloc as well, wherein the potential of the deep reefs has been that shows the results of the study. But these particular deep reefs are at the Mesophotic zone.
Yeah, to answer it more concretely, mesophotic zones are areas with limited light. So reefs that with limited light are called mesophotic reefs. And usually mesophotic reefs are around 30 meters below. So to answer that question, and it's really important because it has been, studies show that it's a refugia of shallow reefs. So which means it's another potential for conservation area.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we would like to thank our panelists again for your very interesting and insightful presentations and inputs in our panel discussion. Let's give them another round of applause, please. All right. So we'll just have a quick photo opportunity before we go to our closing remarks. We would like to call on our president, Professor Victor Andres Dindo-Banit, and Mr. Alex Sodomaco, please, to join us. Colonel Francel, would you like to join us? And all right. And to officially close our forum for today, we would like to call again our Strat-Based ADR Institute President, Professor Victor Andres Dindo-Manhit, for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our partner, Australian Embassy. Thank you to our guests, both from the diplomatic community, our friends from the diplomatic community, friends from government. I see from BIFAR, DNR, of course, from the military, and even the Coast Guard. Thank you for joining us, and of course, media. You know, when we won the arbitral award July 12, 2016, our activity after our event that commemorated our victory was an event on the environment, on biodiversity in the West Philippine Sea. And a lot of people got surprised why I organized one. And given even my background, that I had no idea about that. But I realized it takes really a collective effort, because I encountered one of our corporate friends, then Bank of Philippine Islands President, World WWF President Gigi Montenola, saying it's one of their key concerns. Saw Justice Carpio saying we have to raise this as an issue. Our late chairman Albert Orsar said it's good to raise and and involve this because this is one of our points that we raised in our case. That's how the world is small in the university that I was newly retired at that time, the De La Salle. One of my colleagues, somebody that I greet in campus, just realized that she was focused on this, Dr. Carmen Lagman. And it gives me such happiness that fast forward more than 8 years after, we're here and we continue to raise this issue because we have always believed in StratBase that we are a maritime nation surrounded by seas and oceans. Luzon Strait in the north, Philippine Sea in the east, Celebes Sea in the south, Sulu Sea in southwest, and the West Philippine Sea. These waters have served as a nation's lifeblood. And one of the critical areas is the West Philippine Sea, where our national interests are seen on many levels. You would hear me when I talk to business group, talk about the trade and investment flows that passes through our sea. Even when we speak of the power of information and data, I speak of the data flows, how our archipelago leads and connects different submarine cables. We are constantly monitoring geopolitical risk and opportunities in StratBase, and these include asymmetric security challenges in the maritime domain, such as the aggressive and coercive behavior of our northern neighbor, China. The Philippines sits within the Coral Triangle. We heard that discussed today. The world's largest focal point for marine biodiversity. We are home to over 600 types of corals, 2,000 species of fish, critical ecosystems such as coral reefs, seagrass beds, and mangrove forests ensure a balanced and thriving marine biodiversity. A healthy marine ecosystem provides us valuable food, regulates and improves our water quality, and protects us against catastrophic impact of typhoons. When we run a survey twice a year, issues like this are chosen by our respondents, side by side with sovereignty, side by side with supporting the defense of our maritime integrity, our territorial areas. However, coral reefs remain highly vulnerable to the consequence of human action, such as illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and the impacts of climate change. Moreover, our marine ecosystem from environmental degradation, such as habitat destruction, and even plastic pollution. But mind you, plastic pollution is misunderstood in the Philippines. It's not just caused by us. We have a large coastline. So when you see this report every November, I read that, people fail to understand, go beyond the headline, read the report. We suffer from these plastics because of our coastline, not because it's generated by our communities itself. Of course, part of that is the sachet economy of our people. Last June, in our last commission survey conducted by Pulse Asia, one of our partners, it revealed that 40% of Filipinos agree that the current administration must protect the rights of people and fishing communities in the West Philippine Sea. A separate survey conducted by our other partner, Social Weather Station, revealed that government efforts such as protecting Filipino fishermen in the West Philippine Sea and protecting marine resources of those who destroy it are sufficient at 57% and 55% respectively. But more needs to be done. We prefer more than 57%, more than 55%. These numbers are a testament to the significance placed by Filipinos. Our surveys are done nationally, broken into different geographic and demographic areas among respondents. As a maritime nation, the magnitude of efforts towards attaining these objectives cannot be overemphasized. We at the StratBase ADR Institute stand as stewards of maritime security, environmental responsibility, and sustainability. We believe that in our collective pursuit of marine conservation, people are tasked not only to protect our marine resources, but ensure their sustainable and responsible use. As we fight to assert our rights and safeguard our marine environment, collaborating with key stakeholders in government, the private sector, and the international community is crucial. The Institute calls on all sectors of society and the responsible members of the community of nations to stand together to preserve, conserve, and protect our seas and oceans. Our joint efforts serve as the hull that supports the rules-based order and the mast that sustains the region's peace, prosperity, security, and stability amid the unsettling gust by antagonistic actors known as China. Again, good morning, and thank you for joining us. For those in-house here, and for your little over 100, 120, I heard, online in different times, thank you, and good morning again. Let's enjoy light snacks.
Thank you very much, Professor Manhit. And that concludes our forum for today. Thank you once again for joining us today. And we have, I think, lunch served outside. So please do stay if you have time. Once again, thank you very much for... Oh, sorry, the lunch is there. All right. Thank you very much and hope you have a great rest of the day.